One. And we are recording. I'm excited. I just got a that's great. Well, Justin, welcome. I'm Devin. We're gonna just do a conversation here, and this is my third of these kinds of things. So we'll see if anybody enjoys them. I hope they do. For some background, Justin works in. If you don't mind me speaking for you real quick as an introduction, Justin, in outdoor pursuits. We know each other from ski patrol. We met as ski patrollers. Justin last season and probably moving forward, but I'd have to get into it. Is a patrol director, one of a group of patrol directors in Mount Shasta Ski Park. You do a lot of river rafting, if that's fair to say, and I certainly know a lot of climbing. I do know better than speaking to your river rafting experiences. I know you've done a lot of climbing, so that's always been something that's been intriguing to me, knowing that there's a wealth of experience that I've had some jaunts into, and I could tell you about my experiences, but I recognize that the things you've done are interesting for me to just learn through by osmosis. I think there's something to be said for when you're a sportsman or any kind of craft, I guess, being around a person who has been tempered by certain experiences. You kind of get that I'm speaking for myself, that behavior pattern or that recognition of danger or awareness from them just by being around them. I think that's a neat thing about things like mentorship and stuff, the way that really complex skill sets and things like that can be absorbed just from watching somebody, so that's been one of the things that I think has magnetized me to be your friend, and obviously we're at your colleague and hopefully a competent colleague, and just kind of an intrigue from like a journeyman standpoint as far as the crafts that you obviously I don't know if craft's the right word to put, but I don't know what you would call.
I would call it a craft. Yeah, I would call it an art.
You're right. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and we haven't spoken really much this summer, right? You've been doing. Yeah. I know. I've followed some of your posts just because I haven't been on Facebook that much, but I try to post to Facebook when I post stuff. I know you've been doing guiding, so that's super exciting. But anyway, that's just kind of a groundwork. So, I mean, geez, man, I don't even know where to start.
Well, I guess, I think that's a great place to start right there. Do you have a specific question you want to start with?
I mean, how you doing? I think before you feel like you need to answer, I want to tell you something else. And I think this was probably something that I left out before. I probably should have practiced this for the video, but I think it's fair to say because it's all good. Every time I ask somebody to do one of these conversations with me, because I'm trying to have as many of these good conversations with people that are interesting, such that conversations themselves can be good. And interestingly, I get almost one question from everybody, right? The variances aside, everybody asks one thing. And I haven't given you the answer to that question. And it's, well, what are you going to ask? What's the theme? What are you interested in? What do you want to know? Right? People want to have a level of security and understanding and definite definition of what's going to happen. And you know what I always say? I'm not going to ask you any question. Like, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't want to have any specific aim, thematic aim, or interest in having the conversation other than the conversation itself. Like, I know that seems kind of high-minded, but I really do believe in that. So even though it leaves the other person at a loss, it's a mutual loss. It leaves me at a loss too, and that's fun because then it's like I want you to feel confident or comfortable or insecure in the knowledge of what we're supposed to say to the point where you can just so I mean, I have a bunch of questions, all that drab aside. and I could start firing. But yeah, I don't have any specific only picking your brain. You know, feel free to stop me at any time. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
I mean, yeah. How are you? How's climbing been going?
Yeah, I've been well. I'm feeling healthy. I'm staying busy with the mountain guiding, as you mentioned, and you know, I've also been finding balance with doing some multi-day river trips on the lower Klamath over by Happy Camp. And, you know, a theme that's been going on in my own thought process is, you know, feeling gratitude for what I do for work. And in particular, being in an inspiring place, being up on the mountain, you know, and seeing the stars every weekend, and then a sunrise that comes with it. And, you know, it allows for me to be very in tune with the cycles, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And it's a beautiful space for me to do some introspection, even though I'm accompanying guests up the mountain. And so I just turned 27 a couple days ago.
Happy birthday. I saw that. The 13th, right?
The 13th, yeah.
July baby. I'm a June baby. So I turned 33 less than a month ago.
Well, congratulations, Devin.
Thank you very much. Happy birthday to you. More proximally. Yeah. We're summer kids, huh?
Yes, definitely. Water people.
Water people is right.
Yeah. So it's, you know, the neat thing about a birthday is it inspires a reflection on a block of time, a year. And
that's right.
So that's what I was doing. I was looking back on all the growth and the change and the challenges and the highlights. And ironically, I was camped in the very same spot in a boulder field where I was a year from that day. So
really,
yeah. But yeah, you know, and I think I'm feeling good about my choices and feeling inspired to continue to want to be my best. And you know, been thinking about future things. You know, I like having goals because I think it brings like a sense of urgency to each moment, making it feel like it's part of something greater. And so, yeah, you mentioned that I have a love for the water, and I have a love for Nepal. And so, you know, some of these thoughts I've been having is like, well, you know, what am I doing in my free time? I could be learning Nepali and challenging myself, right? But that I never really, you know, since the last time I was there, I knew this would be good for me, but I hadn't really felt inspired. And so then this like creative vision started coming to me of doing a float. You know, I think it'd be something like 3 to, well, it'd probably be a good like month and a half to float from Tibet to India.
Wow.
Along the Kaligandaki. But, you know, that's just this like a vague specific, but it's this feeling that is inspired when I think about doing this idea of a long float across this beautiful place. And, you know, one of the things that's going on over there is that it's a third world country that since 1950s, when Westerners started coming in, which was pretty recently, you know, only 70 years ago, they're like racing to be first world. So there's emerging middle class millennials who speak English very well and have access to the internet and are tapped into the global culture. And the government there is putting in a lot of infrastructure, you know, energy projects. And given that there's so much steepness of the terrain and water in the Himalayas, all the rivers are perfect for hydroelectric projects. And very quickly, these free-flowing rivers are changing. You know, something that you and I know living in the States is that's our way of life. We've always known dams to be there. So there's a bit of a calling in a couple of ways. One is, you know, to experience these beautiful places for personal pursuit.
Sure.
But I also feel like, you know, perhaps to share this message in some form or another would be to do good for something beyond myself. And
that's
so
interesting.
anyhow, so the inspiration to have focus on the day-to-day is returned, because I would like to go out there in about a year from now. So
in a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's, as you can tell, there's a lot of research that I still need to do. But the fire is there. You know, last time I went there, did a ski mountaineering project.
Wow.
It took about a year of researching every day. And I don't have to do that, but since I'm giving so much of myself to something, I would like to really make sure it's focused. You know, I don't want to just go over there and kind of go through the motions or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. I have so many questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so like firstly, well, I want to ask you all about the ski mountaineering that you already have accomplished. But I want to do that secondarily to asking, well, the joke that first came to mind before the kind of two train of thoughts that I want to take, because I think they'll both be fruitful, is, you know, God bless you. You got a great plan. You're gonna plan it out. You're gonna give it its due diligence. You're gonna get the knowledge you're gonna need to be able to honor the experience. Everything you're saying is resonating so hard. And the one thing that came out of my mind that made me laugh internally is, are you dating anybody? Do you have a relationship at this point? Because that's an easy thing to do when you're single, dude. You know?
Wow, that was something I was thinking of talking about, because that's also.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's not super important, but I do want to ask, because you had told me in short about being at base camp Everest. So I know you've been over in that part of the world before. Was that part of the ski mountaineering you did? And just tell me a little bit about the ski mountaineering you did, and then I'd kind of ask you a little bit about the plans for the boat, but they'd kind of just be vague things. But I think that's appropriate, because, as you say, you're early in the planning stages. But yeah, tell me about ski mountaineering in Nepal.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's not a common thing. And the idea came to me, how long ago was it? Gosh, time is a blur. I think it was the year before I went out there for the ski mountaineering trip. So 4 years ago, I went out there. And this was with the Outdoor Leadership Program here at the University of Ashland. Went out as a group, maybe 15 of us and 3 instructors. And we trekked around Manaslu. Took 3 weeks to do that. And then we did a raft trip down the Kali Gandaki over towards India, which is what I was referring to earlier. But when I was on that trekking trip, all kinds of inspiration was flowing through me on many levels. But one that's very tangible is my love for skiing. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. You're touching on something that resonates with me when you're talking about your passion and your love of skiing. So no, go ahead. I don't mean to stop you.
Okay. Yeah, I know. That's great. I love sharing that with you. We like to ski.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm walking around, and I'm seeing many peaks that there's very little information about. They may or may not have been climbed, and definitely nobody's skied them. And something about that was appealing to me, I suppose. You know, I had these thoughts of when I was young, a young boy, and I had a very strong desire to be somewhere or in places that no one else has before. You know, and remember, this is child brain, but I would look at a room and I'd be like, I bet nobody goes to that corner. I'm going to go stand there just because it's a novelty, not because it's, you know.
I hear you.
So anyhow, that love for novelty and the exploration of something that is unknown was really calling me. And so I got back to the States, and I was feeling so weird. I guess it was my first time experiencing cultural shock. I had traveled to Europe or something when I was younger, but that's entirely different. So I'm back in the States, and I'm just feeling like a stranger to a place that used to be home. And this idea came to me, like, why don't I commit to that thought I have of going out to Nepal this week? And then all the inspiration started to come back, and I didn't feel so confused. I was like, okay, there's something to move towards. And so coming back to Everest, I looked into that area. I had a lead from a very well-known film by Jeremy Jones, where he skied in Nepal.
Right. What is it? Higher, deeper, faster?
Yeah, this one I think is called Higher. Yeah, because it was up high. Yeah. And
was it the spine wall that they went and did?
Yeah. Definitely different from what I skied. As far as like terrain, but
that's crazy, dude. I've skied my whole life. That's so steep and so much vert. It's just like, oh.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But so I was like, okay, this is a lead I can work with. I looked up the time of year he went, and he went in September. And I figured, well, if I find another skiing project in that same area, which is Khumbu, which is the Everest area, then
right,
I'll go from there. And so I looked up peaks that have been climbed before, and I came across Mira Peak. And it's, for you have this reference. You could imagine it's something like Mount Shasta, Avalanche Gulch, you know, with 7,000 vert. In this case, it was more like 9. But basically, the alpine zone starts, that transition where the trees end, starts up at like 15,000 feet.
Wow.
And then so the summit was 21, still is. It's 21 and some change.
Might be a little higher now.
Yeah, so I was like, hey, this is like pretty similar to what I'm comfortable with here in the States, but it's bigger. And so, yeah, I went out there and some interesting things happened. I met,
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I went out there by myself, and I came across another group, and it was a Nepali who has skied Dalaguri.
I've heard of Dalaguri. Yeah, it's spelled very interestingly.
It is.
I don't know the first thing about it, but I've read about, DHAL or whatever.
There's 14 peaks that are over 8,000 meters, and this is one of them.
You said 14?
14 of them. Yep. They're all in the Himalayas or the Karakoram.
Yep.
So, we connected, and we initially met down at one of the lower villages before getting on the mountain. And then ended up crossing paths with him again later on the mountain, and doing a fun ski with him on the way out. And it was pretty neat. I was excited. I was really inspired to come back and keep doing it and maybe guide people out there doing that. But I discovered that there's going to be obstacles. One of them is that this person I met has a relative who is a commissioner in the Nepali government, and he talked him into creating a permit for skiing. That's $1,000.
That didn't exist before.
And it didn't exist before, no. And there was some deceit involved. When I first met him, he said, hey, have you heard about the ski permit? I said, no, I haven't. I knew I had to have a climbing permit, a general mountaineering permit. And he said, yeah, it's this new thing. And I got busted last year skiing Dalaguri for not paying for it. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want that to happen to me.
Right.
He said, oh, it's like a $2,000 permit, and let's split it. You pay $1,000 and I'll pay the other $1,000.
Right.
So obviously I didn't have $1,000 with me on the mountain. So I'm like, okay, I'll meet you back in Kathmandu. When I get back to Kathmandu and I do some research, I go into the government place.
Yeah, you just ask them, what do I owe you or whatever, huh?
Yeah, and I was like, what is this? And they're like, what ski permit? What are you talking about? And I had to dig. I spent all day. And eventually I'm talking to the folks who are in the upper part of the Nepali Mountaineering Association.
Wow, okay. And they were affiliated with the government?
Yeah, the Nepali Mountaineering Association is huge.
Yeah, I could believe it. I mean,
money maker for Nepal. Especially, imagine the Everest scene,
Yeah, right. No, it makes sense. All the money would go through them, or all the permit or whatever. I don't know the exact, but okay, I'm with you. I hear you.
Right. So I'll keep it focused here. I don't want to digress.
No, yeah, it's okay. Whatever.
So I get in and I get a copy of what it says, and I see that it's only $1,000.
Right.
And so yeah, that taught me a big lesson. Not to speak poorly of a group of people, because it's only one person, but there is this like habit of folks in Nepal being not the most forthright.
Okay, so let me see if I understand the story, because I'm not sure I got it. So you met up with these individuals and then ended up kind of palling with them and planning to ski, and one of them told you that there's this permit that you need to get that was $2,000 and give him $1,000 and he'd pay the other $1,000, but it ended up being, after you had found the truth, that the permit was only $1,000. He was just going to jack you for $1,000.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying? Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yep. And there's more to it. And before I discovered this, we talked about how I could bring clients from Shasta, and he would be like the Nepali fixer. So he was
a con man. He was just leading you into we've got 2 of those,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so this has kind of left a situation where there's few people who've gone over to the Himalayas to ski, and this guy he's trying to monopolize it all, knows of who I am. So if I were to go over there and ski and want to share it with folks, I would be conned into having to pay this $1,000. And, some people say, oh, that's not a big deal. But for me, it kind of is. Like, people spend $10,000 on a permit to go up Everest. That doesn't appeal to me. What appeals to me is the authenticity of the unknown. Right.
Well said. That's a beautiful sentiment.
So anyhow, so the idea of guiding people out there, I don't know. I want to go out there and ski again, but I don't know if I'm going to be telling people about it because of this whole situation.
Well, let me ask you this. how much of an impasse is that individual? I mean, it's just a guy. It's just a man. Is this person somehow representative of like an official wing of the government that you can't?
He does, yes.
That you can't
circumvent. His uncle. And maybe he's lied to me. Maybe he doesn't actually have an uncle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, dude. Just from hearing the story, and I obviously don't know. I'm hearing everything secondhand, third hand. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But you're nice enough to tell me the story. Like, you know, there's paranoia and there's pronoia, right? Like, don't assume that you're already in checkmate unless you're fucking in check.
That's a good perspective. You're right. You're right, man.
Fuck them. Go ski. What are they gonna do? You ever see Locked Up Abroad? Don't take some fucking opium with you or something and end up in a Nepalese prison. You don't want to be in a Nepalese prison. You want to be in a Nepalese mountaintop skiing. You know, if it's $1,000 to get rid of them, then that's always in your back pocket. But you don't have to surrender before the fight. Fuck them.
Thank you for sharing that, Devin. You know, I don't really explain this to people, and so your perspective is maybe needed. I appreciate that.
Well, that's all I got to share, right? So that's an interesting story. So this next jaunt is going to be more so centered around floating and not skiing this time. Are you not going to take your skis?
I don't know. I have a decision to make.
Yeah, it's a good question, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you can rent anything at base camp. Not that maybe you can, but not to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
I think I will. I think I'll bring the skis, and I think I'll return to where I went last time and climb the adjacent peaks because I know that sweet spot of when to catch it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So, but the floating I think is what's motivating me to get back over there.
That's interesting.
And that's been a change in my life this last year or so. You know,
what has been a change? Just floating more? What do you mean?
Yeah, or boating, you know, kayaking. I really dove into it and spent. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I dove into it. I made a splash.
There you go.
And I just been, you know, that's when I wasn't skiing and working ski guiding or patrolling with you. I was pretty much kayaking, and I don't know, something pretty magical about it.
Well, you know, let it be said to our friend and late colleague Leaf.
Yes.
In the spirit of loving boating and enjoying the outdoors, you know. So. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that to Leaf, man.
Yeah, no, of course, man. That's super interesting to hear you talk about getting more into boating. You know, I was going to say earlier, and I think it's fair to share because I think that it touches on something kind of deep-seated, and I don't know if something that you've really conceptualized or maybe you have or not, but I certainly have been faced with this reality, and that being, let's say within the community of people that would say, you know, courtship with the unknown willingly is magic, like in the way that you explained that, like, I need to go somewhere that's never been occupied, or I sense this intimacy with chaos or with nature in its raw form or whatever is wild, or this weird, like, undefinable. But then interestingly, there's a counterpoint, and that says, oh, you love to go, and the same question functions in every way that I can apply it, and I can give you my take on it in myself, my behavior. Okay, so why do we as outdoor recreational enthusiasts, let's say, you know, to be as neutered as possible, to be highfalutin, let's call us, you know, that is to say people that love to ski or snowboard or surf or boat or climb mountains or, you know, I don't fucking know, I was going to say fly airplanes, but that's almost more about the machine and the synergy of technology, although there's a little bit of that in the rest of things. But anything where you're going out into a place that is in some sense a manifestation of the kind of the whole thing, right? When you're in a tornado or something, it's impossible to not accept the fact that there's something much larger working, and you're just getting to somehow be present for its acute changes. Of course, you probably feel the same way when you're in a snow event, or I'm sure you evaluate the CFS when you boat, right? And you're knowing how the river is flowing like a vein might flow faster under more force or something. So there's this connection to the larger body, but the critical nature of a simple acceptance of one's desire to do those things as I want to go to somewhere wild misses the criticism that, well, why do we always go to the same places, or why do we go to certain places, and what is it about those specific places? And then as I ask myself that question, because I don't just go ski mountains. I have noticed that I ski in very specific places. And is that just a random? Is that just because of practicality or proximity or whatever? Well, sure, there's always that argument, but that's kind of a reductionist argument. It's like, why did you move there in the first place? I would ask myself. And a thing that I see that really clearly for myself is the way that I surf. And then this is where the beautiful metaphor comes in, because I have the answer to it. So the criticism is, oh, are you really just a freedom? Like, I'm asking myself now, just to cement the argument in my head, or the understanding in my head. If I'm just a water man, let's say, well, then why don't I just go everywhere and surf? Why don't I just be on a paddleboard all the time and paddling in the water? Why don't I have a sailboat? Why don't I? And I probably would love all those things, but in looking at my behavior, I've gone to very few beaches, given the vast array of beaches that are within striking distance, let's say, from where I find myself. But I've gone there many, 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 many times. And I've gone to the places right around them several times. And so there's this heat map of where places that have allowed me to evolve, let's say, have shown me the way to do that. And there ends up being a real reciprocal relationship that's composed of respect, a healthy dose of fear, a real playful willingness to be right where I know the things are going to be the most dynamic. And surfing on a reef is a real good way that I could flesh out that metaphor, but I think it holds for places that are rock, boulder fields, or a mountain climb, or a mountain to ski, right? Because there's this real understanding of the rhythms that has to take place to be able to get good skiing, let's say. And then by a larger kind of metaphorical understanding of that, I find that there's a really meaningful thing when you say things like, one of my favorite songs was this guy that I just randomly met, and he gave me a thing. He met him in Trinity Center. The ocean is a woman. And that's sweet to say, and it's a romantic notion, but it's meaningful. Why is it meaningful? Because when I go surf a specific spot, and again, the same metaphor holds for skiing and climbing and boating. I think you can just mix and match the cookie cutter outline of logic. But the way that I've been able to surf proficiently, I'm no great surfer, but I can go out and surf and be safe, and it can be, high risk and high, reward and waves of consequence. I wouldn't go paddle out in double overhead pipeline right now, but I would watch it for a week and then go out on a small day. Like I can manage myself. So what is that? It's a relationship that I have with somebody other than my wife. Like it's a relationship with a place.
Yes.
I know it so well that by virtue of the fact that I've seen it in all of or many of its moods. You see what I'm saying? And I just find that that's so understandable when I start to look at the lens of the way that I've, you're talking about your journey, and it's beautiful. You're a competent skier. I saw you learn to AT, but you're getting into boating. You're obviously into mountaineering and climbing and skiing. And now you're talking about one particular place on the planet that just needs your presence. And it's so interesting to hear that, because I can resonate with that very, very meaningfully in a place that not a lot of people let's just say, not all the people in population. I don't fucking know how many people behave like this, but I know in my circle, let's say, or in some of my circles, it's hard to have this conversation. People, I think, all understand it, but unless you're actively pursuing that in your life, unless you're going and honoring a place like in your schedule, it's hard to communicate that fact. And I do the same thing. And how do I do it? Okay, well, I go to 3 Mile and I surf, and I go there when I know the swell's peaking. I go there when I know the tide's right. I hope to be there when the wind changes and it's offshore and it's good. I have had this is not my conceptual model. This is a truism. And it's my metaphorical attempt to understand a truism. And how do I go so far as to make that claim? Because anybody that has ever done anything like this will make the same claim from their own perspective. People talk about dating a certain surf break, or the love of the mountains, or somebody who's a more aggressive framer of reality, let's say, or a conservatively minded person might say they did battle in the mountains and they conquered it or whatever. Well, sure, but it's still this relationship that was had, that was powerful. So that's the way that I come to terms with, because if I don't have that deep level of understanding of my own behavior on these things that I know are powerful, these things that I know manifest like me into evolving into a better me. So the things that I know every single time I do them, I'm glad I did it. They're good. You can't say that about a lot of shit in life, in my opinion. You don't have your favorite food even, and every single time it's like sometimes you go to your favorite restaurant or you make your perfect meal and it's like, I fucked it up. But every single time I surf, I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know, and that's maybe even a little bit unfair because we all have bad times doing stuff sometimes. But I think you get my point. So
yeah, I do get your point.
Having that weird, almost like paganism, in the face of the rationale of a good understanding of the Abrahamic religions, this still understanding of the presence of God, if you will, and I don't mean to make a religious statement, but just speaking to it in other terms. We can have it be secular in the way that AA talks about a higher power or something like this, makes the pursuits worthy of their salt against the argument from a rationalist that might say something like, why are you going and surfing, you friggin' beach bum? Oh, what, you want to go to Nepal? What are you, a millennial? You're gonna eat some avocados while you're over there? And it's well, hold on, give me 15 minutes to enunciate and articulate the reason why I feel like doing these things is justified. But it's I recognize that I don't have the opportunity to do that with everybody.
Yeah. I think it's impossible to convey what you experience other than to tell someone that it's a sacred process.
That's well said.
What was that?
I said, that's well said.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the beauty of sharing these things with folks, because then they for themselves can experience the beauty of that process of entering the flow state and developing that intimate connection with a place.
Isn't that weird that the places do it?
Yeah, it is. There's something significant about that.
It's not this more Apollonian, Western model of the self does all things through its experience of neutered externalities. But that's not the material world of manipulatable agents. But it's is that really what's happening, or are there existential realities outside of the self that are what allows the self to express into more self, into the future representations of that self, the way the DNA gets lit up and gets expressed is by I heard a good one, and it was race or genetics is the interaction of genes and geography. It's oh, that's a trip.
What was that last thing about genes?
That genetics can be looked at, we all say, okay, nature or nurture, or, what genetic markers do we have, or what, anatomical thing, you know, all that kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about it this way, or rather, I read it, and it took me a long time to kind of get this idea into my head, and that is genetics can be looked at as the interplay between genes, like the actual stuff of the code, and geography.
Oh, and the environment.
Right. But I like geography because it elicits in my brain topography as opposed to society. Like I think one's naturalistic environment has a greater degree of effect on the genetic presentation of the individual than social settings do. Like we all get traumatized by people more so than we get inspired to be greater versions of ourselves by social settings in the way that we do in the natural world. I feel like it's 80-20 both ways, right? Because even if you're going to find a good mentor or mentor somebody, as you say, I think the nature of that is more so like that Bruce Lee thing of you know, look to the moon, and it's like, well, you know, and don't look at my finger, don't look at your finger, right? Like the moon's out there, or, you know what I mean? Like as you say, showing somebody the opportunity to have experiences that will allow them to grow, as opposed to be like grow, like you're doing it wrong. Grow this way.
Right. Well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Can I reinterpret that?
Please do.
So, yeah, I think what's happening when we share these places with people, especially if there's some sort of activity involved, is we're demonstrating how it's possible to stand aside and get out of our own way. And in that moment, channel life. And usually they're fleeting moments, but they're substantial. There's something that folks can reflect on and find inspiration through and feel a sense of peace. You know, because I think so often folks who are struggling with, in one way or another to find and maintain happiness is because their thoughts are obstructing that natural state of just observing things as they are. And it's like this, people call it the ego, and it's helpful to refer to it as that, but it feeds itself, you know, thoughts of fear or regret. You know, I think each time you have that thought, it's like the roots go a little deeper. And so the real work is experiencing these moments and getting a glimpse of our natural state and using them as references. And so coming back to your fantastic point about a sacred place is when we do that, we come to it with an intention. Some of us more than others, but the idea is we're setting time aside at the very least to have a moment. And so that's, you know, I think it's neat that someone like yourself and myself gets to share that with people.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think there's so much good to be done in that avenue, let's say, of being able to be coaches and guides and mentors and teachers in any function outdoors and so forth. And the thing that I think tempers my, you know, my mentality from just unfettered, you know, fantasy and mania and trying to go around and do that as much as possible is I've recognized the capacity for real raw sacred experience, if you will. You know, if we're going to go so far as to say these places are sacred places, I agree. raw sacred experience can burn. You know, it's deep. It's difficult to integrate. And I recognize that I, you know, for whatever reason, like to go very much into that fugue state. I've never heard it called that before until I just watched a beautiful roundtable conversation between a bunch of comedy actors, several of which I know you would know. I was just watching. I put it on my YouTube, and it's just brilliant. There's Sacha Baron Cohen. Who's the other one that's really super duper famous? Jim Carrey, Henry Winkler, Ted Danson, and they're just talking, and two other guys who are pretty acclaimed comedic actors, and just talking. And Jim Carrey was because the real table was Jim Carrey opposite Sacha Baron Cohen, kind of the new genius of comedy relative this old just master, right? Jim Carrey having just transcended the heights of comedic acting, right? To kind of redefine it, right? To redefine slapstick humor in a way that was soulful and deeply representative and all of these kinds of things. And so he called it a fugue state. I've heard flow state. We've all heard flow state, and there's a lot of truth to that with how we're able to function quicker and more effectively in the moment. Time dilates, if you will. You know, we've all experienced it. At least I hope everybody's experienced it. I think as an athlete, you recognize that the ability to go there willingly, or let's say hold the moment as wide or as long as you can is really the goal, especially in really time sensitive competitions. But fugue state really as well encompassed the recognition of the flow state as being one in which no new memories are formed. So, and which is also true if you've ever really thought about it. And Jim. And so when he said it, it was funny. It came on with a little like closed captioning, like box in, and it defined fugue state in the video because it knew it was going to be probably, I don't know if it's some fucking link to how many people searched it or something in proximity to that video dropping, but they define it. And the way Carey described it after Cohen was, because Carey kind of wanted the respect that he was due, and there's an interesting kind of interplay between them, but they're all class acts, and Sacha was going something to the effect of like, yeah, you were just electricity on the stage. You were just a nerve. It's like, when you watch Jim Carrey do something in Ace Ventura, he's not doing something. He's in the doing of the thing, right? And he talked about waking up after it. And fugue state was things that you come back from and don't remember. And I not only have heard enough anecdotes from people that I know have experienced it at the high level where they've described it to the best of their ability, but I've also now started collecting different references to it, and super interesting. And it hints at so many different neurological truisms. Like you can flesh out the idea, and that, because the interesting thing about flow state is it has a valence. It has an existential positive nature to it. Unless somebody's just, I don't know, like I can't think of a degree to which somebody could be on, well, I guess I could. A soldier, be in a flow state can be harm. Let's say if they've been programmed, or whatever you want to say, the way in which a training program can then run on autopilot. But at least let's say this. Somebody who is in their right mind and of good moral foundation, inside of a fugue state, inside of a flow state, that person is going to do more good, like in to the degree of which you could accept the premise that a beautiful dance is an existential good, something purely aesthetic done well, it's a hard thing to argue to a reductionist, right? Like the existential value of art. It's like, but it's,
you got to feel it to know it.
Yeah, but anybody with any fucking sense, no matter how founded in rationalism or academia, like gets it. So it's this weird thing where we all have that place for that, but unless we articulate it clearly, it's so easily discounted as a waste of time. So I am super intrigued with fugue state, flow state. That was a real central driving force in my intellectual development, self-reflective process of growth, was really trying to get my head around that. And I've come up with some real valuable findings in my attempt to walk the walk, if you will. It's always one thing to talk the talk. I could sit here and write you a fucking essay about it and be the #1 expert on fugue state in the world. I have Google, but to walk the walk is a different fucking deal. So what I've found is there's a really objective set of measurable, if a person's going to be honest enough with themselves, metrics for achieving an ability to be in fugue state longer. And I wonder if you would agree with this.
Okay, yeah.
And I've heard it articulated by Jordan Peterson. To name drop, he's a clinical psychologist. He's a really interesting personality to listen to. He has hundreds of hours of content online. He was for a couple decades a practicing clinical psychologist. He's a lecturer in University of Toronto, and he's gotten kind of international acclaim because he's been in a political spat, let's say, in Canada. And I won't speak more on it than that, but in any case, he talks about through his practices of clinical psychology, and then he lectures on stories from the Bible and the archetypal stories of like Pinocchio. He's a very interesting guy to listen to. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not selling his books or anything, so I don't give a fuck. But
what's his name?
His name's Jordan Peterson,
okay.
And some of his shit he has his middle letter, so Jordan B. Peterson. But in any case, what he talks about, he wrote a book called Maps of Meaning. Very dense fucking book. I was reading that. I got about halfway through on audiobook, but then he just wrote one called 12 Rules for Life. He's been on a lot of podcasts, and he has like tens of millions of a social media kind of following. In any case, I don't want to get too much into the minutiae of describing Jordan B. Peterson beyond the fact that he presents the idea of there being just a few foundations on top of which the ability to go into higher levels of effectiveness is possible. Kind of a Tony Robbins idea, and that is the recognition of state and the importance of state and the importance of being able to manifest one's own state. How do we change our own state willingly? Well, that's a fucking difficult thing. It takes radical responsibility for the self. It takes 100% accountability, and that's something that we lack in synthetic environments. But interestingly, to our earlier point, natural environments have them as an intrinsic fact. If a person is not responsible for themselves on a slippery rock in Monterey when there's swell surging up at high tide, that person's going to learn real fucking quick. If a person doesn't have personal responsibility in a mountain environment, when there's 1.5 feet of new snow and they're on a super steep slope and they're in a run out, God forbid, but I mean, that person will learn about snow safety, and I know that me on back in trip, and I was the ding dong on that trip, if I could go so far as to say that, but I still take it very seriously. So that's an interesting thing to me. And that is, it's very functional and righteous and meaningful and worthy of being communicated to the less experienced among us, this ability to function in fugue state and flow state, and then the way in which we can have that be a greater part of our own lives. I speak from really working hard to do this for myself, is a moral stance that the self has a real, not only like appreciation of the honesty of it. Like I can't lie to myself, right? I can't say I've done things that I haven't done, or I haven't done things that I have done. So like an honesty with the self and others. It goes without saying that just being able to take one's own word very seriously. Of course that's its own, but this and it's kind of under the umbrella of a moral standing that is acceptable for the self. And interestingly, I learned that part of that is comprised of successful negotiation. So I think that a lot of people, let's say in the throes of a sick society, if I can be so believe, have forgotten the real virtue of healthy negotiation. If not with other people for fear of argumentation or confrontation, with the self. I need to be in better shape. I should run 2 miles in the morning. Yeah, but do I want to run 2 miles in the morning? I could do 10 push-ups in the morning. Do I really want to do that? I could take a cold shower and then I could walk outside. Okay, I'm going to do a cold shower. So this ability to not be an archetype that is like ineffective with the self, but to be multiple archetypes that together can move us towards more effective conduct. And I think that that's really a helpful way of starting, so that I've gotten to this place of being able to negotiate a level of conduct that is at once noble enough and accomplishable for me to be content. Now, the next level, of course, in terms of like jacking myself up, would be to be inspired. And I think you touched on, finding agreements with the self that allow you to be inspired, which is, of course, even a higher expression. And that's fantastic. Interestingly, as well, to just play the other pole, I think when we go towards, I'll just speak for myself. When I am inspired, I notice that there is a propensity as well to be disappointed, as opposed to being functionally present. Then the antithesis, let's say, is less drastically of a valence that is negative. If I'm just present and consciously present, I can just be slightly aloof or inconvenienced in such a small way that it's to be forgotten. So the ability that I find that's meaningful is to be able to meter my own inspiration, use it when it is appropriate, share it in ways that are healthy, because I really struggled with this for a long time, and that being I have these great inspirations that I just want to fucking scream off the rooftops. You guys all have to go surf. You all have to do this. You all have to do that. I know it. I know you have to do it. You have to. And nobody gives a fuck, number one. No. Everybody has their own perspective and point of view, and everybody's in vastly different places of so many different journeys and vectors that it's almost impossible to ever fully understand one another. I think he's touched on something super interesting before, and that was, and you're very terse and able to be provocative with few words, and I appreciate that, because I'm often on the other side of the spectrum. You said something like, oh God, what did you say? I've lost my train of thought. What was I supposed to say? Well, I got myself excited, so now I ran off the rails, but I'll take a breath. Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, I guess I remember what I was going to say. I can't remember what I was getting to with what you had said that had me connecting the dots, but just that I've realized that my invitations have to be given explicitly to allow me to perform, to allow me to show up, to allow me to RSVP, and that's helped me a great deal, being able to be as much out of my own way as possible. And yeah, we were saying something about, oh, that's what I was going to say. So you said something about the nature of words being almost implicitly a misrepresentation of just period.
That's well said. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like as soon as we're in word space, we're not in experience space.
Yep.
And experience, I mean, a lot of animals don't use words, right? They might use just vocalizations. So I don't know. I think that that's fascinating. And I, am trying to stay morally upright to the best of my ability. Training myself physically such that I can deal with the physical trials and tribulations of the path, if you like. And then staying in my lane is something that I really struggle with, but doing that to the best of my ability. And interestingly, there seems to be this really nebulous concept that I've been trying to flesh out recently, and I find it to be almost the most meaningful of any of them, because I can connect them to I can connect this thought, ball, if you like, of just light to some really important parts of my understanding of the world. You know, if you accept the premise that we all have mental maps, but the map is not the territory. You see, we all have menus. You know, we all have neurological firings that represent the meal that we can eat. But the meal is the menu is not the meal, right?
Right.
And that is. So we've touched on fugue state and going to different places, you know, and like novel experience, or even experiencing the mundane in a novel way. Like you talk about going to a place where nobody else is, such that you can have, you know, and that's not arbitrary, right? Like if you're somewhere where somebody hasn't been in the room, you're going to see the room in a different way than anybody else has seen it. And that's a meaningful thing, right? Because things are somehow this weird three-dimensional reality where the different way you look at a thing changes that thing. That's a trip, right?
That's a great point, Devin. I think it's a ordinary moment that became special.
Yeah, I feel it.
And that's part of the lesson as an athlete, is to embody that same level of mindfulness in each moment.
Right.
So everything is sacred.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think that's really, you know, I was trying to articulate that last point of the foundations on top of which, you know, that higher functioning is effective, and you just articulated it better than I could. But the way that because it's synonymous with the sacred, because sacraments and all religious group behavior patterns are ways of trying to elicit this symbol or this function or this representation that is evocative of when it happens in real life, however autonomous or random, and that is to me this concept of space and time. So what is space? Well, space is more nebulous than I think a person who is firmly Western rationalist reductionist and not just, you know, a day tripper or in any sense informed by an Eastern, you know, methodology and thinking about the world, or some measure of mysticism or even an orthodoxy of religion. That person misses the fact that we can go to a great length defining things and building these beautiful pursuits like chemistry and material sciences and engineering and medical, you know, science, and these things that have undoubtedly moved us out of just primitive expressions of ourselves and into this potential of just, you know, a utopia in a lot of senses. Okay. But that dominion over the natural world misses the sacred manifestation capability of nothing, of utter nothing, nothingness for the sake of nothingness. But how does one conceptualize and then transmit the idea of nothingness? Well, I can do it a couple different ways, and I can do it in a couple of different really trippy ways that then still uphold and I've already got different representations that are popping into my brain. The original premise of sacred space, of sacred places, of fugue state and flow state and an evolution occurring in sacred places, of the ability of giving sacred places to other people, of the sacred place being a nothing, a place that is to be experienced, that its true nature is that it does not have anything in it. And what is it? It's the cup. It's the grail. It's the cup of Christ. It's space in Newtonian physics that is only defined by a moving observational window. Well, if the window moves by virtue of different points in space, then the space inside of that window is existentially different. Well, here's the mind fuck. Well, what if we appreciate the fact that general relativity has good tenets in that if we're on Earth, well, Earth is rotating. Earth is also tilting on a oblique or whatever, right? It's also eccentric in its thing. It's also fucking rotating around the sun. The sun arguably is also moving in the way that the full Milky Way is spiraling. The Milky Way is also moving away from some kind of central point that we have a lot of thoughts about. Who knows what the inertia was prior to this one event that we seem to see from the the spreading out of matter in our universe from the observations of our night sky. So there's so many vectors and forces of movement that the space that's occupying between my hands or around you now is not changing. It's unknowable. And the reason why I think the fact that it is unknowable, and the reality that I can't articulate that well enough does not make me less confident. And I recognize that confidence is wise words before a fall or whatever. That this is a truism, because I recognize that my deeper attempts to understand it lead me to larger bodies of knowledge that I didn't know were already there.
Right.
The cup is meaningful because it's what accepts the cup of Christ, and then the chosen imbibe it. Like, that's a fucking heavy set of symbolism if you really try to understand it. At once it's like pagan cannibalism, but another way it's the animating force of the one righteous expression of the human experience is held and given and accepted through the most humble of things. And the thing is the thing that holds all things. Well, what the fuck is that? Well, it's the planet, it's the realm, it's the natural world, it's the place that we go to that holds us. It's the place that all the natural forces cycle through. It's the place that weather. It's the beach with the waves. It's the mountain with the snow. It's the river with the water. Obviously. So what is that? And then what is it in human? What is it in human terms? Well, it's the ability to share nourishment. It's that I can go to the river and boil water, and now we have fresh water, and that's in the cup. It's the food that we've gathered and that we've cleaned, and it's in the cup. It's so the thing that I've found that's a meaningful way of understanding that at once, real quickly for me, and this is something I keep returning to because I think it points to symbolic representations of sacred realities as being really fascinating to me, because they like, I've always been drawn to Dungeons and Dragons. I never played Dungeons and Dragons because I was a little bit after the dice roll generation, but video games and role-playing games and this idea of moving through a mythic, fantastical world effectively. Well, how do you do it? You need your fucking health potions. You need your badass weapon. You need your defense from the elements. You need your shield. You need to upgrade your armor, right? Well, what is that? Well, it's fucking obvious, Your shield, your protection is your upright behavior. Your accountability, your innocence, your respect, right? We all know on a certain level that if we behave in a certain way, if we uphold certain levels of righteous conduct, we're kind of immune to a lot of shit that could potentially come at us if we welcome that through wicked behavior. I mean, that's just a fact of life, and to what degree we can talk about the physics of that, I can't say, but the existential reality that is true for anybody who's lived a life. So there's this call to moral accountability, but more so there's a call to the appreciation of the life-giving nature of experience, raw experience, and then the call to the wisdom and necessary skill set through which we can hold on to those experiences and then share those experiences with the future, with the next people to come to those experiences by their own inspiration, by their own sacred nature of the ability to inform themselves about. I mean, however, you can articulate that. So, yeah, I struggle with these things because I'm trying to be able to hold them more effectively, without dropping, because it takes on, you know, having to carry the cup. It takes on, you know, having the sword of truth, right? The armor of righteous, and yeah, man, it's heavy. I've been thinking a lot about this kinds of stuff, and for me in my journey, it's been coming back to the family, you know, in the way that AA gets people on the right path by making amends. I think that there's a lot of wisdom to that, because I think the foundation of, you know, on top of which the house of sacred experience is built, you know, is good relationships, you know. And so that was the point at which, when I kind of had gotten my fitness to where it was a critical threshold, that then I could look further into the future of things that I wanted to accomplish. You know, my life in the way that I started treating myself and others started improving. Then when I decided to start making amends, I realized that, okay, friendship is not this thing to be managed as a, you know, relationships in general, as a potential inconvenience. It's this tree of fruit. And if I water it enough, if I give it what it needs, if I fertilize it at the right time, if I honor the plants of the connections that I have with people, then things happen. You made a statement of interesting things happen. And I get that was a weighted statement, because there is this mystic, magical, weirdly synchronistic, extraordinarily high density potential energy in space, and space helping people and relationships and interactions. And it's one thing to see it. It's another thing to try to understand it, and then to get a handle of what it means and how it happens. It's a whole other thing to try to enter into those things willingly and manifest them. It's a whole other thing to manifest them well and do them with intention, as you say. I think that's a word that gets thrown around without due regard, because intention is not something that is even easily written, let alone produced and sustained. You know, intention is, I would argue, itself a sacred existential reality outside of the self. It's something that can be recorded and played with and honored and, you know, prayed to for those of us with like addiction or something, like to just be able to have intention, to just be able to, like, in the mind of like a heroin addict going, I just want to not want to do this stuff. You know what I mean? So while I recognize the profundity of true intention, I think it would be a miracle if all of us for even one day could be illuminated to even the depths of our own intention for one day. For one whole day, I think to just be raw connected to the honest, deepest levels of one's own intention would be an extraordinarily hellish and heavenly experience. I think the pulls of it would go so up and down so hard, because, and that's what DMT and things like this do, I would argue further. And to just have 3 minutes of that, to just have 4 minutes of that, is a trial by fire of the soul to honor its own presence in existential sacred space with respect to intention and honor and truth and relationships. And I mean, that's heavy shit, you know? And that's why I think that we can illuminate one another. And that's why I love these conversations, because it's hard to not see and feel where one another is at on these kinds of conversations, isn't it? So I appreciate you, you know, taking the time. I you know, am no closer to the goal. I just try to hold myself from losing my orientation in sacred space as much as possible. You ever see Beverly Hills Ninja with Chris Farley? It's so funny. You got to see that movie. There's a scene, and it's Chris Farley at the height of his comedic powers. And the premise is that him and the guy who acted, he acted in Jungle Book. He was Mowgli in Jungle Book in the live action film 15 years ago. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. And they're all in the dojo, you know, the masters at the front, and they're all, you know, bowed on bended knee, let's say, and they're meditating, you know, and it's implied, I'm sure, that they've had training or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the clip is that they're on the astral plane, and it's the same room, everybody's sitting in the same exact way, but, you know, they're all heads bowed or whatever, but they're now in clouds, it's a beautiful sunset, and they're on some kind of level there. And then Chris Farley, who's as well been raised by these people, but he's Chris Farley, right? Like, is in the same vista, except he's just like, wow, and he's just fucking like just tumbling, just doing, just, you know, just, and he's like still aware and like hearing the conversations and like, yeah, it's fucking, it's hilarious. So yeah. I think just that is a helpful place to evaluate myself from, and I find that I then, if I honor my capacity, for example, to tend towards the mania side of behavior distribution, I'm very difficult a person to keep down for too long, morose, depressed, those kinds of things. Not to say that I haven't been depressed, we all have, and I certainly probably have struggled with more than a fair degree of people, depression that is, but I find I'm more easily revved up than I am slowed down, let's say. So what's the fucking point of me bringing that up? Well, the point is, when I enter into the interactions that I find myself in, the understanding and the willingness to take responsibility for that, I'm able to hold more space, let's say, you know, in the way that I'm saying that just holding space in and of itself, dilating that moment of fugue state, that current expression is easier for me, and also I think more inclusive, because I think that intention, even while difficult to commune with fully in the self, is even then more difficult for the other to interpret correctly, effectively. Okay, because if I'm holding a number behind my back, let's say, but I don't even know what it is all the time, that's my premise. Yeah. Then how the fuck are you going to guess it? You know? So then we have to come to intention, in my opinion, from a different place if we're going to actually understand its nature. And I think that there is a real communion with, you know, these concepts of surrender, and none of them get it quite right, I think, in words, as we have already said, right? Words are just not, they're not there, you know? There is the experience of space. Well, how do you experience space? Well, you move freely. Well, how do you move freely? Well, you move in a way that is animated by deeper energies than the conscious, let's say, rational, let's say, logical mind. If you can move in a way that transcends the logical mind, that's weird. How the fuck do you do that? So, you know, I'm just interested in these kinds of things. And I think that the call of interest then becomes a call to effectively share. And it's interesting because I think that somebody who hasn't been, let's say, initiated in the ways of ski mountaineering or something might ask the question. I haven't to a great degree, but I wouldn't ask the question, but I think I could speak for somebody with less experience skiing. It's like, well, why don't you just go ski? Why are you concerned with guiding? Why is it an important thing to you to be able to share this experience? But I think, and I've run into this with surfing. Part of my surfing journey is that I need an apprentice. And that sounds extraordinarily pompous to say. But it's very meaningful to say, and it's true. Not specifically that I need an apprentice, but that being anybody who's reached a level of acumen in any worthwhile endeavor has to go through a period of taking on an apprentice to then reach, you know, a mastery of it. And as everybody's talked about that, right? Teaching something helps you learn it, you know, articulating something fully and hearing us say it helps to deepen the understanding of it. It's all true. So yeah, I hear that you are interested in transmitting these, you know, experiences of climbing mountains and skiing. Well, frankly, I would be a person that would love to do that with you. So look no further, you know, but yeah, I certainly feel that way in my life too. And isn't it frustrating to not find the right people, or to have somebody that you want to teach, or you want to get stoked on something and just be like they just don't want to do it, or worse, like they don't like it.
Right.
Like, like that's deflating, you know? It's like, fuck.
Well, that's the very reason I do a lot of what I do alone. But it's just because I'm patiently waiting for what feels like the right thing.
I hear you. I don't want to just talk your ear off, dude. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I've been enjoying this. I've recently met someone that I think could satiate that desire to share these moments with as an apprentice and a friend and a lover. So it's been interesting. Yeah, I alluded to that at the beginning of this. I don't know how long ago that was.
Right. Yeah, let's see how much time we get. It won't tell me the time. I'm going to pause it real quick. Oh, yeah, it's okay. That's okay. Go ahead. I'm not going to pause it. I'm going to keep it going.
What?
I said I was going to pause it. I can't see the time bar.
It doesn't matter.
But I won't pause it. Yeah, I'm saying just keep it. But I'm interested to hear. Yeah. I was going to tell you how long ago it was that we started, but I don't know.
Yeah. So I invited her to come to Nepal with me on this next project, and she seems very excited about it, but we'll see. She's also about to move to Antarctica to work down there for 6 months. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's pretty neat. I'm very excited for her, but it'll be an interesting chapter for us. We'll see.
Hollow Earth, dude. You got to tell her to see where the entrance is.
She's speaking through the vortex. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Just see if you can hear the echo. Just have her go, echo. You know.
Yeah, she knows I'll be thinking of her. But anyhow, yeah, man. How about would you be interested in like reflecting on some of the thoughts that came up on this and possibly revisiting these ideas?
I'd love to. I think the first podcast we had, or I did, or I facilitated, whatever you want to say, was with Tristan Haggard. He's my buddy from UCSC, and he's kind of doing his own thing. I could talk about what he's into, but he's got a big following on YouTube, like tens of thousands of people. We're roommates, and you know, again, in the same way, we and he and I have good conversations, and my point being, we're already going to have a second one. So to be able to have several of these where, you know, I have recurring conversations, I think is really healthy, because that's, again, kind of on, like, the thing that's so cool about the internet now as it's maturing, I think, is that people are shown, and this is another thing that I've just taken from somebody else. I didn't conceptualize this out of nothingness. I recognized that somebody else recognized this and then learned it. The long form content is the more fire shit, because, I mean, I don't know why, because, but I can speak for myself. When I'm going to do something, let it be working out or doing some time, you know, that's kind of a weird way of saying it, but I appreciate being able to listen to a long form conversation. It's just better than watching the news. It's better than watching the fucking commercials. It's just, commercials are like, just like louder, flashing lights, everything's real, you know, it's all about numbers and money. And then it's fantastic to see the stark contrast between media like that and then consuming media that's just honestly a representation of real experience. So I just can watch surf videos all fucking day long. Even though they're short bits, I'm just so plugged in. Well, weirdly, podcasting, is that all right? You drop it?
No.
Oh.
Some people are just so mindful.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Clanging it. That's in Greek restaurants. You say "Opa." They break it on purpose. Yeah,
it sounded like it, didn't it?
when you eat and you have some mimosa or what is it, reki or raki or raki, I think. I forget there's another liquor. You take plates and just fucking smash them. Where it goes, oh, then you keep eating, dancing. Yeah, I forgot what I was talking about.
Sure. Yeah, you were just saying that you'd like to have another one, revisit. Continue.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, because these long form conversations uphold the sanctity, let's say, of something that's almost unspeakable, because like I touch on the news as being not a good representation of it, but just humanity. It just upholds what conversation is. Like, what is conversation? Like, so often, you know, we've all heard it, I think, or read it. You know, we so often listen to respond instead of listen to hear. And for whatever reason, I think that podcasting is the antithesis to that. I think it's, and if not podcasting, like go do a podcast because then you can find your voice. It's like, well, that may be, but also just having honest conversations. I don't know to what degree recording them affects the content. I don't think so. If anything, it makes it better because I feel like it's just putting kind of like painting lines on the dodgeball court so that it's really fun and nobody has to worry about the sides being, that just gets lost so often in daily life. I mean, I know you live a pretty outdoor centric life, but so often I think we go to the office and are in the car and everything's just chopped and given to us in small bits, but something beautiful about just a actual long conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know we're all over the place. So I appreciate you being in a public space. So next time it might be better if we're both somewhere where you can spread out and get into it. And a fun thing too is to be able to have a phone with Google if you want to be able to, pull other media, whether it's maps or I don't know. So that'll be fun because I have a lot of stuff that I'd love to share and we can get into it. I don't shy away from a lot of topics. That was the thing that I had learned. I told you from the second podcast that was kind of frustrating. We had this beautiful conversation and me and a friend, this is before this one obviously, and then he wasn't happy with the thing that had happened with it that he had said. And I come on, at a certain level, the First Amendment protection has to be a one that holds water. But again, he didn't want me to post it, so I didn't. So I'm glad that we don't have to, or that at least to whatever degree I can try to avoid that from happening. We're taking those steps. So thank you very much. I think it was fun. I think it was a good conversation. I feel like I kind of talked a little bit. I tend to do that. So thank you for listening. And let me know when you'd like to have another talk, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to looking over it and gleaning out some of the pearls there and working with it. So thanks for the reflection.
My pleasure, man. I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
All right, later.
Bye.